Let's go.
Strong signal. Station.
We're rolling. We're gonna go in 7, 6, 5, 4,
Bringing you on the front line and beyond the headlines.
Outside the wire.
Outside the wire.
Despite the sensational rhetoric, very few people seek to pollute. It's not good business, and all of us want clean air and water. However, when we get sucked into eco-panic, cooler heads seldom prevail. That hysteria costs jobs and sometimes lives. The latest eco-panic is global warming. One legislative solution was to mandate the banning of our traditional light bulbs as they use way too much power and eventually contribute to global warming. That all gets shot to hell if you believe humans are contributing to warming, and that may or may not be happening. But let's say it is. Are we knee-jerking once again? These new and improved compact fluorescent light bulbs contain a small but toxic amount of mercury that makes cleanup of a broken one more than just a sweep. After all the positive hype, we're told that upon breaking one of these bulbs, one must use tape to pick up the glass, ventilate the room, and keep children and pregnant women clear of the area for a few hours. So these light bulbs may be friendly to the environment, but they don't seem to take too kindly to the saps that bought them. Eco-panic has resulted in policy that runs the gamut from public inconvenience to, dare I imply it, death. Here are a few examples. There was the panic that our use of paper bags at the supermarket resulted in the unnecessary cutting down of trees. With public pressure from environmentalists, paper bags were phased out at a cost to businesses passed down to the consumer and replaced by the lightweight plastic bags. A few decades later, the same environmentalists are complaining that those petroleum-based plastic bags are winding up in landfills, are not biodegradable, and thus should be phased out and replaced with paper bags. Sometimes environmental hysteria costs lives. In 1962, former U.S. Bureau of Fisheries employee Rachel Carson published the book Silent Spring that contended the use of pesticides was killing off certain species of fish, bugs, trees, and was a carcinogen. She feared that the use of diphenol trichloroethane was upsetting the balance of nature to the point it would not recover. Regardless of her good intentions, Rachel Carson displayed the typical arrogance. It's amazing how some, especially today, believe that humans have that much power over the environment. Sure, we can alter it. We do so by our very existence. However, to assume the earth cannot recover is the epitome of arrogance. Silent Spring created such a public uproar, DDT was banned. The result? According to the World Health Organization, there are between 300 million and 500 million cases of malaria every year, resulting in more than 1 million deaths, with about 90% of these deaths occurring in Africa, mostly to children under the age of 5. Still, the environmental movement must take partial responsibility for halting the use of what many health experts consider to be the greatest life-saving chemical ever discovered. So great that its inventor, Dr. Paul Muller, was awarded the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 1948. And let's not forget the annual Eastern equine encephalitis and West Nile virus scares. How do we react when one little mosquito is found to have this sometimes deadly virus in our area? We spray entire neighborhoods, bring the kids inside at dusk, and load up on the bug spray. All this because we succumbed to the touchy-feely environmentalism. Good intentions are one thing. Causing unnecessary panic is another. Environmentalists have more influence than most of us realize. Recently, school teachers distributed a fact-challenged weekly reader booklet that sent many children home to nightmares where polar bears were drowning due to human-induced global warming. Eco-saviors claim that biofuels will solve our oil dependence issues, yet ethanol has sent the price of corn through the roof. Many in the world's poorer nations starve because they can't afford what used to be a traditional, affordable staple. But as long as we feel better about ourselves, screw the third world. See DDT. The eco-friendly Toyota Prius was supposed to be the end-all be-all when it comes to green commuting. However, we now know that making a Prius causes more environmental damage than manufacturing a Hummer. But as long as we feel better about ourselves, screw facts. The most recent claim is that the use of one of our greatest inventions, the light bulb, may kill us at some point down the road. When that too is proven wrong, don't hold your breath for apologies from environmentalists. It was all about good intentions. That's all that matters. Here's a great illustration of why only ignorant, liberal dupes listen to Michael Moore. In his latest letter to the world, Moore closed with, "Pennsylvania, the state that gave birth to this great country, has a chance to set things right. It has not had a moment to shine like this since 1787, when our Constitution was written there. In that Constitution, they wrote that a black man or woman was only 3/5 human. On Tuesday, the good people of Pennsylvania have a chance for redemption." Who wrote that a black man or woman was only 3/5 human, and why? Michael, it turns out that the South during the era of slavery wanted to include blacks so they could increase the number of pro-slavery congressional representatives. It took 30,000 people to get one congressman, and in enslaved states, slaves outnumbered whites. It was the Southern hope that with enough pro-slavery congressmen, they could squash much of the abolitionist sentiment Northerners had previously passed. Oh, and by the way, many of the abolitionists later formed the Republican Party. Anyway, there was one philosophical problem. Blacks in Southern states had no rights, thus the North deemed it a joke they only be counted when beneficial to the South. Northern abolitionists argued that since the South considered blacks their property, all property should be counted for the purpose of determining congressional representation. Thus, the Northern abolitionists would include their property, horses, cattle, homes, furniture, pets, etc. The South denounced the proposal, so anti-slavery Northerner James Wilson of Pennsylvania came up with a compromise. Blacks in the Southern states would only be counted as 3/5 of a person. That way, it would take 50,000 people instead of 30,000 in a district to get congressional representation. That had the effect of limiting the power of the slave states. It had nothing to do with the worth of a person, Michael. It had everything to do with diminishing the power of Southern races like those today that continue to distort the history of an entire people purely for political gain. Get your facts straight before you recite historically inaccurate BS to your fans. You would never engage in misinformation, would you? That's how I always started off my after-school video production class speech. I hate kids. I like working with young adults, but I hate kids. I'm sure some of you can imagine how quickly their little jaws drop when I say that. I remind them that when they come to the television studio, they're no longer in school where teachers have to put up with their crap. I can fire anyone for the slightest misbehaving. There are thousands of dollars of video equipment here, so I don't have time to be a babysitter. Today's children are not used to hearing this. They believe all the BS about their being the future. Thus, most expect we adults must genuflect when in their presence. They believe they have rights, freedom of expression, and are on equal footing with adults. And to be quite honest, most lack the maturity to be awarded any of those things. All adults should be paid to have to put up with them. For example, you couldn't pay me enough to be a school bus driver. Almost 3 years ago, I cited a few examples why. Nothing has changed, especially after what happened last week in Gilbert, Arizona. According to ABC News, Tensions began with the 15-year-old girl pretending not to be on the list of authorized passengers. The situation escalated when Sullivan pulled the bus over and asked, "Why are you on the bus?" And she suggested she find another way to get to and from school. The tape shows Sullivan trying to confront a student trying to exit the bus at an unauthorized stop after the two got into a discussion about her being disruptive on the bus. Now, what would you do if an unruly teen not only played games with the rules, but also publicly challenged you in front of others? You're responsible for their safety, yet a young teenage girl gets in your face, uses profanity, and threatens physical violence. You know, however it turns out, you'll be thought of as being in the wrong. The little darling's mom will assume you are out of line. You may get fired and probably sued.
Every day these kids would come home and go, "Mom, you have no idea what this bus driver does." And you tell them, "Go home, it's okay. Just go ahead, it's okay. You know, it's a bus driver, how bad could it get?" Evidently, it can get pretty bad.
There was a time when an authority figure's claim of our misbehaving would seal our doom with our parents. It was always assumed if a teacher said we did it, we did it. But today, if a teacher says the kid was acting up, the normal parental response is,
"Are you sure it was my child? My child would never do that."
The kid hears that teacher's authority challenged by the willing sucker parent, and a future license is informally issued for future disruption. If I were named Secretary of Education tomorrow, one of the first things I'd do away with is this notion that kids have rights. Sure, they have a reasonable expectation of coming to a safe environment and being afforded courteous treatment by school faculty and administration. But as far as their having rights, hell no. If the school has a dress or grooming code, some parents openly defy those rules and sometimes go as far as suing the school. I understand they have a dress code. I understand he has a uniform, but this is total discrimination. They can't tell me how I can cut his hair.
They're saying that his hair is a disruption to the classroom, which I don't understand how.
And we get all shocked when kids act up. When we were in school and there was a locker search, it was just done. It was understood by parents and students alike that those lockers were school property. Nowadays, our children assume those lockers are their own personal property, and their parents would call the ACLU in a heartbeat if they felt their little darling's privacy was violated. When we were younger, it was understood that if a bus driver told us to sit down and shut up, we did so. There was none of this getting in the face of that driver with all the R-rated language there was time to deliver. And God help us if our parents found out. I do hate most kids today. They lack in phone etiquette, don't bathe regularly, thank you, Axe, and lack manners in general. They assume they are on equal footing with adults and that we must show them respect. My father taught me that people upon first meeting deserve to be treated in a courteous manner. Respect was earned. I'd throw most kids under the bus today before I'd ever give them a thankless ride in one. But that's only me. Trichloroethane. Dichloroethane. Dichlorodiphenyl dichloroethane. Diphenyl. Dichlorodiphenyl. I'm going to stumble on this 9 times. Dichloroethane. Dichlorodiphenyl trichloroethane. Dichlorodiphenyl trichloroethane. Okay, dichloroethane. Dichlorodiphenyl trichloroethane. Trichloroethane. Oh, you want to try it? Trichloroethane. Okay, trichloroethane. Dichlorodiphenyltrichloroethane.
What we've got here is failure to communicate. Some men you just can't reach.
If you put your daughter out there as a surrogate, representing and pushing votes for you, and then to say, well, but no one can ask her any questions, horse pucky. That is absolutely, positively wrong. And again, I think it's a great question. Why isn't the mainstream media asking that?
Horse pucky?
Well, it's as good as I could get. It's as good. I'm trying to keep it clean, Bob.
Okay, Mr. Milk Toast. Okay.